Hey everyone, we are doing episode 3 of Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. And this will be the final episode for this book, and then we're going to move on to women's work. And let me back up a little bit. Welcome to Mindful Madness, and we are doing the book club version for Mad Reads, and we are going through a category called Women, Labor, and Value, what women sustain, produce, and never get credited for, or get credited very little for. And I am Christina, and I analyze systems and patterns affecting women. I do not speak for or diagnose individuals. So part of the reason why I do this is, the main reason why I do this is I feel like with everything that women do for each other, all of the organizations, the support groups, all of this, that we, for the most part, are still very disconnected from each other, from the various groups that take care of different areas and aspects of women's and children's social lives here inside of the United States and globally. One of the things that I notice is that we are not talking enough to our daughters and our granddaughters about where we've been, where we are currently at, and where things are heading, and why they're heading in that direction. And in order for women to be able to really step up with enough effort and force that's cohesive, that brings clarity, that brings direction, that is something that's consistent in our society, we are going to continue seeing ups and downs. We gain freedoms, and then those freedoms are quickly jeopardized or not solidified. And part of that is, in fact, because we don't have umbrella structure supports like other aspects of our society has. And until we actually start creating that, bringing things under one umbrella, or narrowing those umbrellas, where we can easily access resources, information, this sort of thing, that we're going to continue struggling. And as women and children continue struggling in our society, that our men in our society and society as a whole will continue to struggle. We need to bring some balance back. And the book club itself is an effort to help women understand the past, the current, and patterns and systems in the future and what we're dealing with right now. We all start in different areas, understandings, backgrounds, that sort of thing. The book club is designed to help us get on the same page. And so that is my main interest here. So we got into, and part of what we're doing, so women, labor, and value, we are working on Invisible Women right now, and data bias in a world designed for men by men. Not saying women don't participate, don't get that confused, because we do. But we need to better understand the functionings, how history is rewritten for women, or just completely excluded, eliminated, absorbed as male input. And so if you've been through edition or episode 1 and episode 2, you saw a lot of that in there. I am going to jump over really quick here so I can just kind of share with you what we did in those previous 2. No, that's not it. Here we go. And okay. All right, episode 1, we covered why is the default sex male in the majority of societies today? Should it be? Who actually benefits? And at what cost? What cost to women? What cost to children? What cost to men? And what cost to society? And how history misses half of the story, data gaps for men and women, zoning, and how zoning really has an impact on our day-to-day lives, especially for men and women, travel patterns for men and women through our day, our week, our month, our year, design biases, that's construction, that sort of thing, bathrooms, let's discuss bathrooms. And then we get into safety protocols, that sort of thing, work and wealth, and how the current system is designed to extract from men and women, but most specifically how it impacts and extracts from women, and how that affects the entire community. And then episode 2, which we just finished up a little while ago, we talk about meritocracy. We've been hearing about some of that in the news a little bit, kind of around DEI, that sort of thing. What meritocracy actually is and how it's promoted, what the differences are between the two, and why that is critically important moving forward. And we talk about balance bias, brilliance bias, and then technology and how women interact with that, and misogyny behind it, how that impacts as algorithms and AI. Super important because the people that created it are not exactly known for being really good with the opposite sex. We'll just leave it at that. Why can't women be more like men? And that's in work and government, gig economy, agriculture, one size fits men, and bros. And now in this segment, we're going to go through and we're going to talk about healthcare, data gaps in research, drugs, symptoms, childbirth, and overall health of women. This also has an interplay with children, of course. We're going to talk about GDP versus uncounted GDP. So what's counted, what's not counted, and why? And labor exploitation systems, the design of the system, tax structures, women's rights are humans' rights, and when disasters hit, and then that will kind of conclude this book. With all of the categories in the books that we're doing with Mad Reads, I do recommend that you buy local, buy used, go to the library, that sort of thing, or go directly to the book author if they have their own web page, that sort of thing. Let's concentrate on feeding our community and not feeding corporate. Corporate's not interested in feeding us. Corporate does not give a shit about our society. So let's not play with the Epstein class. We don't need to feed them anymore. So all of the I still remember when, and I used to be so excited about technology. It's so excited. Like I'd be one of the first ones jumping onto things, and how altruistic they were. And, you know, it's going to be the good of the planet. We're going to solve this and solve that. And now they are just, there's a certain threshold when power and money warps perception. It warps their soul, takes it from them. And yeah, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that is definitely what we're seeing here. Yeah. Nobody should be given so much power and wealth that they disregard their humanity and other people's humanity. So that's where I'm at with that. Ladies, it is so important that we get together and get onto the same page. And with that being said, let's go ahead and finish up Invisible Women. We are going to talk about, and I have my little notes from when I was reading the book, and some of the little highlights. I very seldom am I going to go through and like quote things directly out of the book. This book is wonderful. Lots of information. I really like the in-depth, holistic approach that she took to data gaps in society, why they develop, and how it goes from how we perceive things developmentally as children through our elder years, how society incorporates certain things, and how we've gotten to the point that we've gotten. It is not that any of this was done, well, I'm not going to say any. I'm going to say it is not like anybody set out to be malicious about where we have ended up. Have there been some dedicated malicious acts in extrication, subjugation, abuses of human rights for men, women, and children, and society as a whole? 100% yes. And it's picking up speed now. Was the intention set out that way? Not necessarily. Structurally, we have here in the United States, the people that wrote the laws and the rules, our Constitution and that sort of thing, they were the elite of their time. If you go into history, and I have an instance where last year about this time, I drove across the United States. I took off from Florida, I went up to Maine, and then I skipped across the top of the United States. Solo trip, dispersed camping, this sort of thing. Didn't stay at hotels, that sort of thing. When I had the opportunity to go through the Shenandoah National Forest, and in that area you have Monticello, which is Thomas Jefferson's plantation there. And there's a picture, and I wish I would have known that I was actually even going to talk about this, because I would bring up the picture. I have myself and my little whippet, and I'm holding her, and I'm standing right next to Thomas Jefferson's life-size bronzed statue. And after the picture was taken, I sat there and I just kind of took in this bronze impression of this person. And it was before I even had gone up to the house, did the tour, this sort of thing. And I got a little honestly creeped out. And when we look at pictures of people, when we, and not even like a representation of this person, and he gave me a creeped out vibe. And I just felt a little off put standing there. And then I go up and I do the tour and this sort of thing. And, we talk about how he was married. His wife died fairly young, and that he went to France, and he talks a woman into coming back and living at the plantation with him. And I forget her name. I really should have looked some of this up, but I didn't know I was going to talk about this. It was his former wife's half sister, and she was half black and half white. And so his first wife's half sister from a different plantation, and she was brought up. She could read. She was somewhat educated, and he made promises to her, and she said that she would come back and live with him. And what ended up happening for her is she went on to have 5 or 6 or 7, including stillbirths, from Thomas Jefferson. And part of their agreement was that any of the children that they had would gain their freedom at his death. And she was forced to raise these children in a one-room section of the plantation. And so 5 children in this very small space. And she was never allowed freedom. So she died a slave. And the children were freed. And to this day, they do not know where she was buried. She was not buried on the plantation. And so I kind of look at that kind of stuff. And this is a founding father. And this was his view of things. From the get, an elite, exploitive group of men put the systems and processes in place here in the United States. So anywho, needless to say, this has been a bumpy ride, and it continues to be. And while women have most recently gained a lot of freedoms of equality in our society, and women have, I know that there are some women that have gotten very, very comfortable with the notion that I have my own job, my own house, my this, my that. Completely ignoring and missing the fact that when I was 8, I'm a Gen Xer. Me in my lifetime living now, when I was 8, that, do the math right? No, 5. When I was 5, that 1974 was when women could get credit without a male cosigner, that they could buy property and get a loan without a male cosigner. The capacity to own property was, and always has been, limited inside of the United States. until fairly recently. And that we now have people that are vigorously going after that, including our ability to vote, body autonomy, this sort of stuff. So I'm not going to get too much further into that. One of the things that I think that women have not done a good job of is we gain and then we don't necessarily forget. Well, we do. We forget it was hard fought, and we forget that it was recent. Me, for a long time, this is the way it's always been because this is what I was born into, the freedoms that we've had up until just recently. Not really understanding how tenuous those freedoms actually are. How freedoms for men and women went up against the elite Epstein class, how tenuous those hard-fought rights actually are, and how easily they can be trampled and eliminated. And so it's not just women, it's men, it's children, it is us as a society, and losing the freedoms that we thought America was about. I don't care if you're left or right, you're losing rights because of this elite class. So, anywho, with that being said, we as women need to be teaching our girls and boys, our daughters, our grandchildren in particular, our daughters and granddaughters, and talking to each other and getting on the same page. And so the book club is part of, because we all have different understandings, backgrounds, this sort of thing. The book club is designed to help us all get onto the same page so that we have a shared understanding moving forward so that we can move faster, more cohesively, and have more of a sustained impact. Because if we don't ingrain these sort of things, and historically women have been the communicators, the historians, the center of community is women. And to make our societies better, we have to step up into that position, and we need to hold firmly our society as a whole, and what makes our communities centered comes from female energy. And I'm not going to get too far into that right now, but we have a balance of male and female energy in each and every one of us, because I mean, biology tells us that. I'm not going to get into it too deep, but just understanding that when we balance, if we're male, if we balance female energy in us, and if we are female, that we balance the male energy in us, that it makes us more of a whole and healthy functioning human being. And that radiates out into society. And when there is a balance between male and female energy in society, that we actually grow and are healthy and move things forward with a healthier society. And that goes globally. So imagine if we had that balance. Right now, we're so out of whack. So completely out of whack. And the more out of whack a society is in gender inequalities, the more likely that you have a very strong Epstein class of elites that are making sure and sustaining that. They're feeding it. So So there's that. So let's go ahead and get into Invisible Women. I already gave you the brief on what we went over in the last two videos. So let's get into what we're going to go over in this one. Starting off with going to the doctor. And like I said, I'm not going to go through and I'm not going to quote out of the book. It's really important that you go in and read this book. I think it's probably the most important book that you could read starting this series off. And she does such an awesome job. Okay, so just a few of my notes. And as you're just kind of doing this, I also have reading guides. I have facilitator guides if you want to do this in your own book clubs or start your own book club, that sort of thing. And you can go over to Substack for that information as well. So that being said, going to the doctor and drugs that don't work. So women's bodies have mostly been treated male with the exception of sex organs. Even though chemically, hormonally, all of this is different for obvious reasons. From the get, as far as like the advent of what would become modern medicine, women have been seen as being defective males or secondary. So not their own standalone entities in themselves. So for some reason, medical schools often skip or include little about sex and gender. It is such a big thing. So I have a degree in psychology, and I wish, and we're not going to get into it now, we probably will in other discussions, but I really wish that sex and gender was taught more at like senior year of high school, because there are a lot of really misinformed people out there. When your education stopped at high school, you have sex and gender gaps in your understanding. So, and we're not going to get into all of that right now, but just the fact that it definitely exists. Let's see. And when I go through these little notes, it's just like, oh, I didn't realize that, or oh, I knew that but kind of forgot about it, or hey, that's maybe something that sparks a question, and then you want to go do some more research on that. Men and women, there are pretty strong differences between lung and heart functions. How they function, different stressors, that sort of thing. Same use of cigarettes. 20 to 70 women are 20 to 70% more likely to get lung cancer. Autoimmune, 8% of the population, but women, autoimmune diseases affect 8% of the population. Women are 80% of that. And it might be related to reproduction abilities. Vaccines, we can sometimes over-respond with vaccines. So if we think about different times of the month, different hormones, things are in flux. So even when a vaccine is administered, could have some effect because as a female body gets ready for the possibility of pregnancy, autoimmune can be triggered. And so if something is administered during a specific time, then that could trigger an autoimmune overload. And so more studies need to be done in those realms. Drug metabolism, we know that women metabolize alcohol differently than men do. Part of that has to do with our fat composition percentage. So it goes without saying that there are medications that can be affected as well. And again, also the cycle comes into play. Male and female cells are different. There's pregnancy is still under researched and is not tracked in larger studies. So when a study comes up, they don't they either don't want to do the study because a woman is pregnant, or if they are doing an overall study, they don't account for pregnancy in the study or track that individual that ended up in that study and how a pregnancy may have affected both the child and the mom. So they have a tendency to really kind of stay away from that. Women are regularly pushed out of research as far as being the subject of research or being one of the researchers. And that creates some real serious data gaps. Now, part of the reason why they default to male is a lot of it has to do with the men not having the cycle functionality, and it takes out some of the complications in doing the research. The problem is once they do the simplified aspect of the research, they don't then do it with pregnant women. So problems there. Generic drugs are tested on men, even when some of the ingredients are changed. And when you change ingredients, you can get different effects. So anyway, data gaps. And maybe bringing something up. So when you work with a bell curve, so little bump, the way that they work with the testing of drugs is you're going to have extreme negative effects and extreme positive effects. And then the top of the curve is basically where most people land. And so if you're a little over this way, you might have more negative effects from a studied drug. And if you go over this way, you can have more positive effects of a negative drug. And I used to do sleep studies for Merck back when I was in university. And I've done well over 1,000 sleep study labs where you'd go through and you would hook the patients up to different monitors, heart, this sort of thing, and watch brainwave activity. And so I'm really familiar with that aspect and how Merck at the time was going through and doing research on sleep drugs, sleep deprivation, this sort of thing. And so I was able to see some of that stuff up front. And it's interesting. And if you apply the same thing to things like vaccines, this sort of thing. So when they go through and they do these studies, they're not studying one person. They're studying the effects on a possible population. And so you end up using statistics with that. So if you have random people chosen from a population, then statistically, mathematically, you can expand that to a larger population. And so when we work with these bell curves like this, and you think about things like vaccines, you are going to have the extreme negatives and the extreme positives, and everybody else is somewhere in the middle. So when you have a handful of people that really have serious issues, they will still release the drug if the majority of the population still has substantial health benefits. And so, but it needs to be a certain number, and that's, of course, approved by we'll just say the powers that be, whatever that may be in whatever society that you happen to be in. But they are all working with this bell curve idea that it helps the majority of the population move forward. Okay. So let's see. So we talked about women are regularly pushed out of research, both as subjects and as the researchers themselves. And we kind of talked about that as far as like academia in episode 2 of this. And then generic drugs are tested on men. And then time of day you have a heart attack can affect survival. So your circadian rhythm, this is not the same for men and women, which I thought that was really interesting because circadian rhythms and the research of that, and then being in the sleep study realm that I was in for my university years, and doing all of those sleep studies, I just thought that was interesting. I don't know if I knew that, and now I'm being reminded, but it just kind of stood out to me because I was like, circadian rhythms are very, very interesting, especially if you're somebody that works nights and sleeps during the day. All of that stuff interplays with each other. And here's a thing. So even when a disease is predominantly female, so you're studying a disease and you get cells, you introduce the disease to the cells. How does that interact? And then if you're doing like an A/B testing, this sort of thing, what's affecting the disease inside of the cell, this sort of thing. Even when a disease is predominantly female, male cells will be used. And just right there, I just want to scream. Yeah. Muscle-derived stem cells have an unpredictability. Sometimes they regenerated and sometimes they didn't. So this research, they were using they were gathering stem cells, and they were having an unpredictability show up in their research. This is interesting, especially when you start considering some of the most recent research that we have been finding out about the cells that are in menstrual flow, and also when we talk about placenta, and we're talking about the stem cells in placentas. Anywho, very interesting outcomes that we're finding now, stuff that's really worth exploring. So when they were doing these studies in especially early stem cell research, so fabulous thing, stem cells are base. You can drop them in, and they are able to rebuild, mimic other cells in the area. Like all of the different, there's just so many different applications. I'm not getting into all of that here. So, but early on, there was an unpredictability that they could not determine what that was. Sometimes the stem cells would regenerate, and sometimes they didn't, and they didn't understand why. What they did find out later was that female stem cells regenerate, male stem cells do not. So, is there a reason why we should be studying female stem cells now? Is there a reason why we should probably pay more attention to and not more in relation to don't study men anymore. That's not what this is about, but you're missing half of the damn picture. So let's include women in more of the studies. We might want to be careful currently about some of that. Anywho, my brain can go real dark really quick with any of this stuff anymore. Okay. Male-female cells exposed to estrogen, then exposed to viruses, the female cells fought back. How many treatments have women missed out on because the studies were only done on male cells? So, when male cells are the only ones used and they're exposed to estrogen and then exposed to viruses, the female cells fought back. So male, female cells exposed. So if you're only studying male cells and you're pushing all of whatever it is that you're researching and you're only doing it on the male cells, the ladies are missing out on all of the stuff that could have worked for them. Okay. Government research is the most funded research by taxpayer dollars to research labs that then take the results, privatize them, and sell it back to us. These are things that the American people should actually own and benefit from and profit from, not private companies, especially when they're using our tax dollars for the research. So, and a few of our Congress people have got up and have fought about that, but of course, the Epstein class generally rules out with a lot of that. Pacemaker placement is male-based. So all of the information, studies, and all of that sort of thing, it's biased towards how pacemakers respond in male bodies. And then that data set is then applied to insurance AI. And how might that show up? So generally, men are first with all new medical tech development. And then, if they think about it, they might do the research and expand into women. I have a friend of mine that recently had extensive back surgery. And they're, I don't want to give out too much information. There was a specific medication that she was given. And when I read up on that medication, and even in the doctor's office, the doctor had said this is something that we use predominantly for men, but we have been using it with women. But then some of the cautions with it were actually pretty severe. And so we did some additional research, and we opted not to have her take it because there simply was not enough research to make us feel comfortable at her age for her to be taking that specific drug that was really designed for men, prescribed to men by male doctors. So anywho, blood pressure drugs don't work on women the way they do on men. Resistance training actually does a better job of helping women with blood pressure issues. The majority of sports medicine research skips women completely, unless you're like in an elite class. And then there are more specific studies, but generally they also kind of are more biased towards male athletes. 2016 U.S. research now requires both sexes be included. That was only 10 years ago, right? So, and generally it's poorly enforced. These are guidelines and not rules. Legacy drugs were never tested on women. High blood pressure meds reduce deaths from heart attack, but increase cardiac deaths in women. Hello. Adverse drug reactions are higher in women because they're not tested on women. Remember the curve? Yep. So we're more on the adverse side of things. And some drugs given to women do nothing. And when I sit there and I think about that, like all of the conversations that I've had, friends, family, this sort of thing, and talking about like pain meds, this sort of thing. Again, close friend tells the doctor that certain pain medications do not affect her. And if administered can actually create additional problems if they try to give her a different sort of pain medication. And then the dosages are predominantly set for men's metabolism, not women's metabolism, so that can create another problem. It's like you know that some of that's there, or you experience or you see this stuff happening, but it's not until you identify like why you're seeing it and the scale that you're seeing it. Like when I think about drug interactions and women having these issues, how I can say that has been somewhat common when I sit here and think about some of that. And then you multiply that across the United States. It's a thing. Oh, okay. And then here's some fun stuff. Symptoms in general are not a thing unless it fits male symptoms. Okay. So heart attacks. Women are more likely to die from a heart attack because the symptoms aren't male symptoms for the diagnosis. Think about AI and algorithms and how those data sets are predominantly male biased. And so when students are taught what to look for, in what predominantly comes up, it is the male version of what a heart attack looks and acts like. Aspirin in general does not help women. The symptoms are different. So women are more likely to have stomach pain, nausea, breathlessness, fatigue. They're not likely to have left arm weakness or chest pain. And standard biomarkers are set too high for women. So when you're testing for a heart attack, their little reader will go off, because there is a release of a certain chemical. I'm not sure what it is. I'd have to go through and look it up, but they look for it to confirm whether or not you have indeed had a heart attack. And it sets higher for men. So if it's low, it's not reading that she actually had a heart attack. And then she kind of goes through and she gets into the history of certain common diseases around the world, historically and currently. She'll talk about tuberculosis and how that's really predominant because in the majority of the world, the type of stoves that women cook over. HIV and condom use, she goes in and kind of talks about that. Ebola, women are far more susceptible to Ebola. Autism, that's something that shows up differently in girls than it does in boys. There is also what's kind of becoming more commonly understood as like a menopause autism, where menopause uh, is showing stronger symptoms during that time. So there's a lot of women during menopause that are being diagnosed with autism, or to some degree, like, because nothing is, there's like lighter versions and more extreme versions of autism, but it's generally masked in girls and women differently than in boys. And it's curiously masked in a way that also fits normative behaviors and expectations of what's expected of women. And so they can go untreated for decades. They're finding that anorexia could be a part of autism. I thought that was interesting. Asperger's also displays differently. ADHD. So in girls, that can come through as being like more disorganized, more scattered, more introverted, that sort of thing, which is interesting. So boys, hyperactivity, being outgoing, risky behavior, this sort of thing is more or less for ADHD, and boys are ADD. Oh, and then the freaking favorite, telling girls and women their symptoms are in their head. Yeah, that's fun. Let's see. Here's some of the stuff that gets missed. It is estimated that 1 in 10 women worldwide, so about 176 million women, have endometriosis, which is a very painful condition. It's generally scar tissue that develops in and around the uterus. And it can cause severe pain, sterility. It can take, because, the symptoms and everything are in our head, apparently, it can take an average of 8 years in the UK and 10 years in the US for a woman to be diagnosed. And there's no cure. There's no cure. So not enough funds go into research to help with any of this. And then we talk about pain. Women's pain can vary depending on a cycle. And for all of the ladies out there, I think a lot of us can understand some cycles, and your cycle changes throughout your lifetime. What you're experiencing now might not be what you experience 10 years from now. But I think we can all relate to, there are certain cycles where it's like, even your hair hurts. And sometimes there's periods when women just don't want to be touched. It's overstimulated, it's painful, it's an irritant. They just want to be left the F alone. And it doesn't last long, and then it's gone. But I think we can all kind of relate to that. I think most of us have experienced that. Women are more likely to be given antidepressants for pain, and men get more pain med. We get antidepressants for pain, men get pain med. Yeah. Pain historically, Women have had to deal with the idea that you're hysterical, you're crazy, psychiatric wards, having lobotomies, antidepressants are basically the modern lobotomy, so think about that one. Antidepressants. Antidepressants are given to women 2.5 times more than men, often than men. You know. Mortality and quality of life. I think we've all been hearing pretty consistently that married women have a declined, marriage impacts women negatively. Shorter lifespan, and definitely not very happy for the majority of women out there that are married. They do better when they're single. And I will go back to, again, that imbalance. There is an imbalance with the women, and there is an imbalance with the men. And until we bring that balance internally to more of a balance point, our external relationships and our societies will continue to struggle. You cannot ignore the other half of the population and think that you're going to have balance in yourself, in your personal relationships, or in your societal or global relationships. Let's see. Illnesses that women dominate or have exclusively are not funded or studied. PMS, 90% of women, not studied. But erectile dysfunction is heavily studied. Severe period pain. Male doctors don't believe it exists. Male review panels are not interested in women's studies. And the data gap. Consider this investigative since there is no history of study. Oh, God, this one kills me. Childbirth and weak contractions. So weak contractions, oxytocin. Unresponsive women end up doing cesareans. So there's an increase of cesareans. We also know that Black women are more likely to have cesareans. I might kill this. More acid in myometrial blood, the likeliness they won't respond to oxytocin. So when oxytocin is released during labor or is not released enough, women are unresponsive to the dilation needed to be able to pass the baby through, which forces them into the cesarean. If they're given, this is so simple, if they're given a bicarbonate soda to drop, that's what that is. So there's more acid. That was my bad. So there's more acid in myometrial blood, the likeliness that they won't respond to oxytocin. If they're given a bicarbonate, which reduces the acidity level, then they're given a boost of oxytocin. Once they're given the oxytocin, 67% of the women had a vaginal birth. So they were able to dilate and push out. Soda plus oxygen, 84% of women had vaginal births. So, U.S. has the highest death rates of developed countries. Black women are 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or complications, and they have a much higher rate of cesarean sections, and all they need is a soda and some oxytocin and further research. Like, why does that even happen? Not to mention the fact that they're now trying to, anywho, I'm not going to go down that road today. All right, let's talk about GDP, the Epstein elite, and I think this is actually, yeah, we're getting pretty close to the end of the book here. So let's talk about and how long have we been talking? We've actually been talking for an hour. We are going to go ahead and do episode 4. And we're going to do that because I have a puppy that's starting to whine at me. I have a Belgian Malinois and a Whippet, and the Belgian Malinois, Miss Iris, is starting to whine at me a little bit. So it is 11:30, and she would like her treat, and she'd like to go outside. So I'm going to take a break here. Thank you for joining. Go check out the other 2 videos, episode 1 and episode 2. When I come back to episode 4, we are going to talk about how the Epstein class exploits the population and how this affects women in particular. We're going to talk about gendered poverty, why that happens, where it happens, why it happens. We're going to talk about women's rights, our human rights. Not to be cliche, but let's get into it and talk about why that actually is, because there are some people that still are kind of not sure why that matters in the way that it does. And then we also want to talk about when things go wrong. So when chaos happens, conflict, pandemics, natural disasters, that sort of thing, and how that affects women and children in particularly, and homeless issues, and then that will conclude Invisible Women. So I will see you back here. I should probably be back here 11:30. I'm going to give this about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So thanks for checking in. Check out Substack. I'm going to have more writings over there. I am going to be picking up speed moving forward. I've got quite a few books that need to be gone through, so I want to get this information out there. I do also have additional information on Substack. If you want to host your own book club, I have facilitator notes over there. I also have, as you're reading the book, I have a guide. And again, it's not that this is like study stuff, like there's going to be a quiz or anything. Take what you need and leave the rest. You don't have to read the whole book. If you don't read the book at all, I've designed this so at least it gets you thinking about what you're seeing in your own life as you're moving around wherever it is that you live. Why are you seeing what you're seeing? Why are things the way that they are? And we are going to be getting more into and connecting the dots with resources so that we can more easily back those resources that are doing specific things that we're all interested in and we all benefit from. And this isn't just about women. This is about our entire society and how it's in trouble. It's in a lot of trouble right now. So anywho, I'll see you guys back here in just a little bit.